All right, the clock struck 12:32 Eastern Time. So a good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you're sitting across the country right now. Thank you for joining us today for our virtual CreativeConnects event to review our first ever survey focused on all of you. Before we get into the fun stuff, I have to read some techie stuff to make sure everyone can see and hear everything. So you should see a presentation on your screen and hopefully hear me right now. If you have any problems seeing or hearing, please make sure you are joining the event in Chrome and your Chrome browser is updated to the latest version. In addition, if you see a message saying you've entered the event in webcast mode, click the three dots on the top right of your screen and click exit webcast mode. If you have any technical problems, including error messages about firewalls, please chat in the chat box and our tech support will reach out directly to help troubleshoot and resolve. Speaking of the chat box, if you have any questions throughout, please feel free to drop any questions in there. We have some moderators on this call that could answer some, maybe tee them up for Lynn or I, or even respond after the presentation as well. And because we all know the first question everyone's going to ask is, will this recording be available after the webinar? Yes, we will make it available after the webinar as well. All right, so our agenda today is a quick welcome and introduction. We'll spend a majority of our time going through the survey results, both actually sharing the data, and Lynn and I will be offering some insight into that data as well. We have some breakout rooms later on as well, where they'll be moderated by our members of our recruiting team. You'll have a choice of joining different topics. And again, you'll see a member of our recruiting team in there. And then we will wrap things up at the end. So my name is Tim Gearhart. I am the VP of Talent Delivery here. I've been with Cella for over 20 years. Lynn White is joining me on this webinar to review the data and results.
Thanks, Tim. Welcome, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Lynn White. I'm the Recruiting and Delivery Manager of our Southeast region. I'm with Cella for 7 years, so super excited to be here.
Wonderful. And for those who may not know Cella, we are an award-winning leader in consulting, staffing, and managed solutions for creative marketing, digital, and proposal development teams. We are passionate about helping people build meaningful careers and partnering with organizations to help them win. We are the only nationwide creative staffing firm to be recognized for our service excellence through an award called Best of Staffing for 12 years running. So as Lynn said, couldn't be more excited to spend this time together reviewing this information. It's our first annual survey focused on understanding all of you and what drives and motivates you when you're looking for work. The responses throughout here help inform us how to work and interact with you all, but also help us talk to our clients on how to work and interact with you all. In fact, Lynn and I are doing a similar presentation with companies in the next couple of weeks as well, where we get the opportunity to share the results and the details about things in the survey, like culture, remote work, work-life balance, benefits, money, how fast companies move. All that being said, we'd like to both personally thank you all for completing the survey, because obviously your participation is what makes this all possible. So as I pop the executive summary up on the screen, I just want to start talking about like what the general story and vibe is. Obviously, the most obvious statement here is COVID has an impact on this, right? Of course, there's a COVID impact on the survey results. Primarily, we see that with answers to questions about remote work, both what's happening now in the remote world, but also what you all are looking for in the future with remote. But there's some things that just stay constant and are never changing, like how important culture is, how important a relationship with the direct manager, how important having advancement opportunities and feeling inspired by the work and that work-life balance is as well. Some other takeaways, the job seekers are just not spending a lot of time looking for work right now. So it's important that clients are capturing attention quick with key information. And anything over 3 interviews is just too much. It's just too many interviews, and some candidates are walking away from companies based off of how many interview steps there are. And finally, over 60% of responders said a positive DEI policy is either very important or important in their job search. While money plays the obvious role in why we all work in the first place, it's generally not the #1 motivator, and we're going to see that throughout this as well.
So we're going to talk about who completed our 2021 talent survey. We had overwhelming participation. You all completed it. So we had, for our first talent survey, a whopping 408 participants, ranging from a variety of skill sets and industries across our country. 60% of our respondents were located on the East and West Coast. Millennials led the pack. So we surveyed a wide variety of generations, and that data shows that almost half of our respondents were millennials. The other generations who completed the survey, we had baby boomers, Gen X, and Gen Z. So when we took a look at who actually had completed the survey, were they managers or were they the individual contributor? Majority of the folks who did complete this are in an individual contributor role. We had over 70% of the individual contributors. I think this is really neat to just point out here is because as we go through the presentation, we're going to be able to hear from the employee's point of view versus what our managers are wanting and desiring in a person for their team. And we also took it a step further when looking at the folks who completed the survey. We asked in the survey, what type of employment is your current situation? So the data shows that more than 50% of the respondents are currently working through a staffing firm like Cella or freelancing. 33% are employed directly with the company, and less than 10% right now were in between projects or assignments.
So as this slide says, if we're up to you, remote work is here to stay. In fact, 7 out of 10 are working fully remote at this point in time. 87% are working either full-time or part-time remote. That's a pretty big number. What's interesting as we go to the next slide is COVID only impacted 63% of the people working remotely. So what I mean by that is 40% of people that are currently working remote, whether it's part-time or full-time, are doing so because of COVID. It was happening so much before the pandemic is what that means. And that really isn't a surprise, right? This is an industry that's always been at the forefront of remote work. So while other industries struggled with that, trying to figure out how to get their footing for it and to be successful with it, this industry wasn't that way. And you made that transition so much easier for sure. Again, no surprise, but a whopping 92% of responders prefer working remotely full-time or part-time. It's a pretty big number. I want to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about what we're hearing and seeing from clients at this point in time. Remote work is here to stay. In some way, shape, or form, in fashion, it's here to stay. Companies know that it's worked at this point in time and that job seekers are looking for that. But what we're starting to see a little bit of a shift with is where for a while companies were open to having someone sit anywhere across the country. It's starting to be brought a little bit more back local at this point of where some companies are looking at it and saying, we are going to have a return to work. We are going to have in-person meetings. And so whether that means that they want someone to come in for meetings every now and then, or whether they want someone to come back for 2 to 3 days a week on a regular basis, they do want those people to be much closer to what the office is. So that's what we're starting to see a little bit more of is what we're calling more that local remote. So the remote part works, but they need someone to be a little bit closer to the clients. Again, not every client. Some clients have embraced this and are totally fine with it, but we're starting to see a little bit more of this as well. And with the current trends of where we have more job openings and qualified professionals to work those opportunities, it is going to be interesting to see how some of those companies adjust to making sure they're finding top professionals.
Why do industry professionals leave their organizations behind? Give me the same job, pay, and benefits, and I'll say yes. 51% of you shared that you would make a lateral move if you were offered the same compensation package at a different company. So what does this mean? Tim and I were talking, and I think that the biggest takeaway here is that the data shows that it's not always the compensation and benefits that are retaining their employees. There are other factors that are going to play into this. So in a few slides, we'll dig a little bit deeper to really identify the biggest drivers that are motivating job seekers to leave their current employment. 41% are planning to leave their current employer. So this was interesting. Almost half of the respondents that we surveyed are looking to leave where they currently are working. So I found this stat a little bit higher than what I would have had envisioned. So I'm curious, like Tim had mentioned earlier on in the presentation about COVID and impacting the survey. Tim, what are your thoughts on these numbers? Do you believe that maybe COVID could have played a role?
Yeah, Lynn, it's a great point. I think the numbers are fairly in line with what I see in the media. Some I've seen a little bit higher, some have been a range. But I think it's two different things. I think that it's the hot market, right? We all know that it's a hot market. We've already talked about more opportunities than professionals, to qualified professionals to hit it. So I think that there's the element of, I want to see what's out there. I'm hearing other people I used to work with getting new opportunities and maybe getting that raise or maybe working at a place that has a better culture, toxic environment we talked about earlier. So I think there's an element of that. And then there's the element of where COVID fits in, of where some people were ready to make the move and COVID hit. And then for obvious reasons, they stayed with their company. And now that we're at a hot market, they're willing to look for work as well. So I think it's a mixture of the hot market and then that rollover that's left over from COVID, where people did want to make that move, but were sort of stuck and didn't want to do it at that point in time when the pandemic hit.
Yeah, that's a good point. Poor leadership and a toxic environment drive talent away. So we took a look here. So why are talent resigning and making a move? As we mentioned earlier, the respondents shared that they would make a lateral move even if they were offered the same benefits and compensation. So this data here really does portray the many reasons that talent are leaving their role. But toxic environment and poor leadership were the top two reasons that we're seeing are driving employees to look elsewhere.
So what do creative marketing and digital talent want most? Well, let's start off based off the results here, is that you want companies to make it fast and easy to find their opportunities and apply. On average, the participants said they only spend 1 to 3 hours the entire week looking for work. So Lynn and I were talking about this a little bit and discussing it, and a couple things came to mind. Yeah, as we thought about it more, there's so many opportunities right now for qualified professionals that lots of job seekers are finding opportunities because of people reaching out directly to them, and that prompting it rather than them having to go look for work on their own. The other side of it, if it's anything like what we're seeing here internally at Cella, is referrals are playing a big part of how we're hiring internally as well. And I think that's happening out in the market as well. So it's really not that responders aren't willing to put the time in to find the opportunities. It's that there's so many opportunities out there that it doesn't take as much time to go find the next opportunity. So no surprise here, based off of that last slide, is the main way that participants want to have content delivered is through the channels they already spend time on. Even when you look at the rest of these results, though, as you look at things like blogs and podcasts and videos, those are all things that can be served up on social media. So it really is about that platform of where they're spending time to make sure that companies are hitting the information there, because that's where the bulk of time is being spent. And as we continue this path and you look to see what the most popular job site when using social media is, it's LinkedIn, right? It's not a surprise to think about it being LinkedIn as the main focus for that. I mean, that's a business, it's a social media platform built for the business world. So again, having it be a part of what you're doing every single day is where those jobs are being fed. But, Lynn, it's interesting how many people actually do use these sort of non-traditional job boards of a Facebook and Twitter and Instagram to look for work. I mean, it's over 50%. It's actually more of them combined than it is LinkedIn. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And it is definitely interesting to see Facebook, Twitter, Instagram for job searching. Typically, you think of those types of platforms for sharing and liking photos, scrolling through content. But when you look back at who completed our survey, we saw that 46% of the participants were millennials. And as we know, this generation has been using and evolving with social media since it has began. So I think that when you really do look at it, Facebook has many different groups and networking opportunities where you can connect to new opportunities, connect with new people on there. There's ways to search for job leads. And then if you think of Twitter and Instagram, just simply searching a hashtag that's relevant to a specific industry or a job title that maybe you're interested in could be another way where you're identifying job leads that way. I think that this slide here and the stats that we're learning is definitely something that we would be beneficial to share with the hiring managers to allow them to understand how they can get the most out of their job placements.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think you're going to see more and more companies adjust to that for sure. That's a great point, Lynn. All right, moving on. So now we get into what job seekers are looking for. The top two reasons here are work-life balance and remote. We already talked about remote, right? That's not a surprise there. But work-life balance plays into the remote aspect in two different ways, in somewhat competing ways. So, not having a commute and being able to work from home obviously gives you more time to spend with the family, gives you more time to even get errands done in the middle of the day that used to be maybe a weekend thing, or you have to take a half day off to work on. So that's the benefit of it. But the other side of it is you're hearing more about people getting burned out, right? Because you never leave the office when your home is your office. And so what that makes and what that means is that it's becoming that much more important to have companies and managers who understand that balance. And again, it goes back to what Lynn was saying beforehand. It connects back to that toxic environment and relationship with direct managers for sure. On this slide, and staying here for a second, one of the things that Lynn and I thought was interesting is that DEI was last on this list, but when it has its own breakout of the question, you see it's actually 60% say that a company's DEI policy would actually influence their job search. So it still is a pretty big number. A little bit of insight I can offer here from us internally is we continue to hear that internal staff and how important the DEI is to them with Cella, and not just internally, but the way that we approach job seekers and the way that we talk to clients. In fact, our DEI council itself is made up of 25% of our company, and a third is at our recruiting team right there. So one of the areas that we focused on and been working with our clients on is that we're asking candidates what pronouns they use and incorporating that when discussing candidates with our clients. We want to ensure we're representing our candidates the way that they represent themselves. So I think you're going to see this number continue to grow as we do this survey and ask a similar question going forward as well. So benefits was high on the list on the last slide too, no surprise, right? But we wanted to break that out. We took out and said, outside of health benefits, what other benefits are important to you? No surprise, again, remote is the number one thing. It's pretty surprising how high it is, but I guess it fits into that 92% of people want to be working remotely going forward. 401k and retirement planning, also very high, still pretty far off from the remote side. And what that tells me is that it still goes back to what we said beforehand, that salary and money, of course, are major factors, but they're not the driving factor. It's the quality of life that's so important to it. And even when you keep looking through this list, there's a big drop off once you get past the 401k. But if you group those next four together on that list, things like PTO, mental health, gym memberships, access to professional development, those are work-life balance topics, just like we talked about in that last slide as far as what job seekers are looking for. So all those things, those grouped together, are higher than other monetary type of things like wealth management or loan forgiveness. Not as high as the 401k by any means, but it's still, you have that same trend that you see there as well. Speaking of professional development, as we round out this section, the question was, what professional development opportunities would you take advantage of? And overwhelmingly, the responses were that if they're offered, they can be taken advantage of. And hard skills led the way with this, but soft skills were really heavily represented here as well. And it's a great opportunity for us to make sure we're sharing with our clients to continue to show how important the PD opportunities are for attracting and retaining top professionals. And in our last slide in this section, we took a little bit of a different approach to asking the different angle of what would make you not apply, what would drive you away from applying to a company. More than double any other response, it was just if the role doesn't sound appealing. So while it may be the right job title, but if you're reading the job description and you're just not brought into it based off of what the skills are needed or what the job is doing, job seekers are just moving on. So, grouping that below, you have remote again coming up, location not being far behind that. But one of the things that Lynn and I found interesting here was the bottom of the barrel here is company culture and values being listed. And that being so low is kind of in opposition to that toxic environment part that we talked about beforehand. So just a general call out, I would have expected that to be higher considering people are leaving for toxic environment, but it's not something that's being a driving factor for it as they're looking through things.
Interviewing and job offers. So this is what you all said. Everyone's view on interviewing. So the question was, how do you prefer to interview? And are you comfortable interviewing with more than one person at a time? So when it comes to interviewing, you all shared that you are open to in-person or virtual interviews. It was basically almost 50-50 there. And it still seems very much important that talent are going to be meeting with more than one person in the interview process. I think this can be tied back to job seekers finding it very lucrative to meet multiple team members so that they have a good understanding of the team dynamic, what the work environment is like, is there collaboration, what's the team culture. And another piece that I always would suggest when speaking with talent is make sure that you're asking the right questions because you are interviewing them just as much as they are interviewing you. So I think though the job seeker knows that because they feel comfortable meeting with more than one person to really see the big picture and understand who they will be working with day in and day out. So when do interviews become excessive? So what is the maximum number of interviews that you think are appropriate for an interview process? So while many of the respondents answered that they want to meet the team members and they're open to whether it's virtual or in person, like we just saw previously, you all shared that anything over 3 rounds of interviews is just too much. 56% of the respondents shared that 3 rounds of interviews is the appropriate number of steps in an interview process. So I'm curious to get everyone's thoughts on this one. I'm going to launch a poll here. And I'm curious, at what point in the interview process are you walking away? Are you removing yourself in the interview process because maybe a client has some sort of assessment, whether it's like a writing exercise or some sort of case study that they need you to do? Have you walked away because there's just way too many steps in the interview process? You've gotten past that 3 rounds. They now want to bring you back for 4, 5, 6 rounds. Maybe everything's been going well, but you just didn't relate with the hiring manager. So was that a reason that you've walked away? Or has it just been way too slow from the time of like first round interview to when you get feedback to when they're scheduling the next round? It's just really dragged on. Or perhaps everything's been going great, but you did some research on the organization and maybe you came across a poor client review, whether it was on Glassdoor or Indeed. So I'll give you all a few seconds here and go ahead and select why you would remove yourself from the interview process.
Wow, Lynn, the results are coming in fast and furious here.
Ooh, I'm excited. Because this is definitely something that we see when we're working with our talent of, people saying, hey, I'm removing myself. So I'm curious to see what the group here says.
And really, it's been heavier in this market than we've ever seen it before, of where it does pop up. It always happens, right? There's reasons that withdraw yourself from it, but because it's been a little bit busier with how hot this market is and how many other opportunities, and hearing some of the stuff from the survey, we thought it was a great way to ask this question. And again, the results are flying in here, so we'll keep it going as results keep going.
Yeah, and I think too, when we, to just be able to see these percentages, it's also good for us, like when we are talking with hiring managers or when we are, sharing some of these stats and numbers with, our clients, this is what our talent want. And this is why you may be losing out on somebody in this tight market.
All right, looks like it's closed, Lynn, from getting all the results.
Right. So it looks like here the process was moving too slow. We had 38% of you who shared that you've removed yourself because it's just too dragged out. Maybe you haven't got feedback. It's been a little bit hard to understand what the next step and expectations are. Second place here for why you would pull yourself, and I mean, totally fair. You just didn't relate to the hiring manager. 22% of you said that. And then we had a tie when it came to too many steps and client assessment, 15% and 15%. So 30% of the group here said, client assessment, I'm out. Too many steps in the interview process, I'm also out. And poor client reputation. This is interesting. 11% of you said that, interview's going good, but you did some research and you found maybe a poor review, you would remove yourself.
Yeah, Lynn, it's no surprise that all of them got votes on this. Right? Every reason is there. Right. We're asking for the top reason, right? So it's interesting to try to choose between them. Are you surprised by any of the results with this?
I would say the poor client reputation being last place, well, not, just having 11% is definitely, I would have thought maybe a little bit higher, because we run into that where, we present an opportunity to a talent, they go on the interview, things are going great. And then all of a sudden we're blindsided because they came across, a review online. But I think the audience today maybe understands that sometimes those reviews that you see on Glassdoor, you have to take them with a grain of salt. So that was a little bit surprising, but I'm not surprised to see that 38% said that the process is moving too slow.
Yeah, for sure. I think that makes a ton of sense. And even the manager side, right? We saw the results beforehand, being that relationship with the direct manager is so important, and it's always been such an important thing that sometimes that's even more important than the client reputation, because the team that you're working on is where you're so ingrained with and working on together with. So not surprised at all, but love to see the results here.
Yeah, definitely. When is bending a little a big issue? So would you accept a job offer if you liked the manager or the potential manager, but the salary was 5 to 10% lower than you had expected? So basically, this slide is like our summary, right? We learned from you that yes, 45% would accept a job offer if they liked the manager, but the salary was a little bit lower than what they were expecting. And I think that goes into, again, like what's motivating this individual in their job search. Like, are they coming from a toxic environment, and that's their number one driver right now, is finding an organization where they have a great relationship with their manager, and that's what's most important to them. I did think it was funny. 33% said, I don't know, which is fair, right? Like it's kind of hard to like weigh right now if you would accept it. You don't see the job description. You don't know who that manager is. But as you all shared earlier on throughout the presentation and the survey, that the interview process plays a huge factor in your job search, who you're working with when it comes to your day-to-day collaboration. The culture and environment seem to be the most important aspects of what an opportunity can bring to you. But still, almost 50% of you state that it is very important to have a good manager.
All right, just a quick recap, because I saw someone asked about the poll. The top reason that was chosen was slow-moving interview process at 38%, followed by didn't relate to the hiring manager at 22%. I also saw a question about resources, and it led right into this. So thanks, Lynn, for running through that. That's the end of the actual survey portion of the presentation. To find more information about resources or tips like interview tips, portfolio development, job strategies, please visit our blog site, cellainc.com/insights/blog.